It was a time when Israel was sinking into darkness. Following the death of King Solomon, God's chosen people had slowly begun to forget him under the rule of Ahab, the worst king Israel had ever seen. The blood of innocent prophets stained the Holy Land, hunted down and eliminated by his cruel wife Jezebel. Israel had forgotten the very name of God and instead knelt before altars of stone and wood. But God had not abandoned his people. Deep within the hills of Gilead, God was preparing an answer. From that forgotten, barren land emerged a man who would change history forever, Elijah. His very name held a promise of judgment and fire. My God is Yahweh. This is the story of the mightiest prophet who commanded the skies to close, called down fire from heaven itself, and never tasted death. But it is also the story of the man behind the prophet, his fears, his doubts, and his loneliness. Because Elijah was human, and his greatest battle wasn't against kings or armies, but against himself, against his own doubts and the loneliness that consumed him from within until it broke him. For many years, Elijah had lived in silence, hidden among the barren mountains. He was neither warrior nor priest. He wore garments made of camel hair, a thick beard covered his face, and his eyes burned with an otherworldly fire. But one day, God revealed to him his calling. The waiting was finally over. Elijah arose, descended from the mountains, and headed directly into the heart of corruption, Samaria, the capital city, where King Ahab ruled alongside Jezebel. The soldiers stationed at the palace gates, upon seeing him approach, froze in place, paralyzed by an unseen power, and let him pass, as if the air itself made way for him. Elijah walked through the throne room corridors, without announcement and without escort, servants retreating at each step. The columns of the palace, which had bowed to kings and ambassadors alike, now seemed to witness something entirely different. A wild prophet, no crown, no sword, striding forward as if driven by God himself. And there was Ahab, seated upon his throne, surrounded by counselors, idols, and vanity. Yet before he could even question who this stranger was, Elijah stood boldly before him and uttered words that would seal the kingdom's fate. As surely as the Lord lives, the God of Israel whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain during these years, except at my word. Silence fell like judgment. No one dared draw a breath. Elijah didn't wait for a response. He turned around abruptly and disappeared the way he had come. Ahab spoke not a word. He didn't order Elijah seized nor curse him. He just sat there, motionless, and then it began. Suddenly, the clouds started vanishing. The air turned dry, and the sky above began to close up, like a door sealed shut from on high. And as Elijah departed, God spoke to him again, saying, "Leave this place, go eastward, and hide yourself by the brook Cherith, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have commanded ravens to feed you there." Elijah obeyed without hesitation and headed east while the land dried up in his wake. The cool breeze ceased, and the dew, which had moistened the fields of Israel each morning, fell no more. The sun scorched the fields, and what once had been a proud and fertile nation began to wither. Judgment had already started, and for 3 long years, not a single drop of rain would touch the earth. But as the kingdom entered drought, Elijah traveled across hills and valleys until he found that hidden place, Cherith. The brook, Cherith, lay concealed between the dry hills near the Jordan, a thin ribbon of water slicing the earth like a scar, snaking its way among dry rocks and dusty bushes. Elijah settled into this hidden oasis, deep within the desert, where, with every sunrise and every sunset, a miracle unfolded. At dawn, as the sun began to stir in the east, a fluttering of wings would suddenly break the silence of the sky. Ravens, black-feathered birds, would appear along the horizon, carrying bread and meat in their beaks. They would settle near the prophet, place the food before him, and then, taking flight once more, vanish into the sky. They were birds considered unclean by law, creatures despised by men, yet these were the ones chosen by God to deliver nourishment morning and evening alike, when the hills were painted amber by the sun's fading light. In profound solitude, Elijah ate in silence and drank from the brook, watching days melt into weeks and weeks lengthen into months. And this drought, like a silent curse, spread its dark shadow over all of Israel. The wells ran dry, the fields became barren, and animals collapsed exhausted onto the cracked earth. From his throne, Ahab screamed orders in desperation to find the man responsible for his ruin, yet no news ever came. Elijah remained hidden by the brook, yet gradually he noticed something changing. The stones once submerged now emerged like islands along the riverbed. The once powerful current reduced to a thin trickle. The drought he himself had prophesied was finally reaching him. Until one morning, when he bent down to drink, he found no water, only the dampness between stones. The brook Cherith had dried up. But Elijah neither panicked nor complained. He simply held onto his faith and waited, until at last God's voice spoke clearly. "Arise, go to Zarephath in Sidon and stay there. I've commanded a widow there to care for you." The Lord was sending him into dangerous territory, to Zarephath, the very homeland of Jezebel, the queen who had vowed to wipe out all his prophets. But Elijah did not hesitate. He stood, wrapped his cloak around him tightly, and began walking. The journey was grueling. The sun relentlessly battered cracked fields and lifeless trees. The drought spared nothing, and all living things seemed bowed beneath the very judgment Elijah himself had proclaimed. When Elijah finally reached the gates of Zarephath, suddenly he saw her, a frail woman dressed in rags, picking up dry sticks, her face weary, her hands cracked, and her eyes defeated. Something deep within his spirit confirmed it. This was the widow. Elijah approached, his voice calm and his face weathered by the harsh sun and desert wind, and said, "Please, bring me a bit of water in a jar so I may drink." The woman, not yet knowing who he was, turned obediently. But before she could take another step, Elijah continued, "And please, bring me a piece of bread in your hand." Then she stopped, her eyes lowered, and with a trembling voice she replied, "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread. All I have is a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil left in a pitcher. I was gathering a few sticks to prepare one last meal for myself and my son. After that, we'll die."
If you live in an Oregon zip code and have 0 DUIs in the last 5 years, listen.
And there, in that still moment, another truth deeper than the drought itself was revealed. The crisis was not only in the skies, it had reached deep into hearts, robbing them of hope. Elijah responded gently, "Do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, bake a small cake of bread for me and bring it here. Then afterward, make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The jar of flour will not be used up, nor will the pitcher of oil run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain upon the earth." The woman stared at him in silence. She faced a choice: cling desperately to the little she had left, or let go and trust. She could die with dignity, or obey and see what happened. She chose to believe, not in Baal, nor the idols of her people, nor even her own instincts. She chose to believe the word of a stranger, a dusty wanderer whose eyes seemed to have witnessed more than any man could bear. She returned home, lit the fire, poured the flour, mixed in the oil, and baked. And when she came back to the jar, the flour was still there, and the oil never ran dry. That day all three of them ate, she, her son, and Elijah, and again the next day and the next, and on, for many days. But suddenly the widow's son fell ill. At first, it was just a fever, then each breath grew shallower until, within hours, the child stopped breathing. The mother sank to her knees, broken from the inside out. The same man who had brought life into her household now seemed to have brought death. "Have you come to remind me of my sins?" she cried out to him in tears. "Have you come just to kill my son?" Elijah gave no response. He took the boy gently in his arms, carried him to the upstairs room where he had stayed, laid him upon the bed, and cried out to heaven. "My Lord and my God," Elijah cried, "have you brought calamity even upon this widow who welcomed me into her home by taking away her son?" Then he did something that no prophet had done before. Elijah stretched himself out 3 times over the boy, as if hoping to pour his own life into the child's body, and pleaded desperately, "O Lord my God, let this child's life return to him." There was a long silence, heavy, unbearable, until finally the boy's chest rose, his lips parted, and breath returned to his body. Elijah carried the living boy down the stairs, presented him to his mother, and said, "See, Your son is alive." At that very instant, the widow regained more than her son. She regained her faith. With tears streaming down her face, she said, "Now I truly know that you are a man of God, and the words of the Lord from your lips are true." In a pagan land where altars burned for gods carved from stone and flame, a spark of true faith had now been lit. But still,